I used to think I had it all figured out. The dream job, the perfect wife, Emily, someone who stood by me through thick and thin, and a life that looked exactly the way I imagined it. At least that's what I told myself every morning as I grabbed my coffee, put on my suit, and went to work. I thought love was a simple formula. You worked hard, you were loyal, and you built a future. No one told me the price I'd have to pay. I was 38 when Emily left me. I never saw it coming. And that's the thing about belief bubbles. They're fragile. They burst when you least expect it. All those years I thought I could have both. A career that demands every ounce of my time and a marriage that should have been as solid as my ambition. But what I didn't realize until too late was that you can't ignore the most important parts of your life and still expect them to thrive. I learned that the hard way. The first few weeks after Emily left were the hardest. It felt like I was walking through life in a fog. I'd wake up each morning, go through the motions, but something was always missing: her. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost not just my wife, but a piece of myself. And the silence in the house was unbearable. I didn't know what to do with my hands, with my time. All the routines that I'd taken for granted, the little things, making coffee for two, folding her clothes, planning weekends together, suddenly felt like empty rituals. I threw myself into work, hoping that staying busy would dull the pain. But it didn't work. My mind would wander in the middle of meetings, wondering where she was, what she was doing. Was she thinking about me at all? Was she happier without me? I told myself that this was for the best. I had to move on. But every time I tried, I just found myself stuck. The first few weeks after Emily left were the hardest. It felt like I was walking through life in a fog. I'd wake up each morning, go through the motions, but something was always missing: her. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost not just my wife, but a piece of myself. And the silence in the house was unbearable. I didn't know what to do with my hands, with my time. All the routines that I'd taken for granted, the little things, making coffee for two, folding her clothes, planning weekends together, suddenly felt like empty rituals. I threw myself into work, hoping that staying busy would dull the pain. But it didn't work. My mind would wander in the middle of meetings, wondering where she was, what she was doing. Was she thinking about me at all? Was she happier without me? I told myself that this was for the best. I had to move on. But every time I tried, I just found myself stuck. At night, I would lie in bed, the same bed we'd shared for years, and feel the weight of the emptiness beside me. I could still smell her perfume on the pillow, and for a split second, I'd think she was there, that maybe this was all a dream. But then reality would slam back in, and I'd feel like I was drowning in it all. The loneliness, the uncertainty of what would happen next, gnawed at me. I had no answers, just a sea of questions. I tried to fill the void by hanging out with friends more, trying to act like everything was fine. But even they could see through my mask. I joke about how life was great, how I was adjusting, but the truth was, I felt like I was falling apart on the inside. I had built so much of my identity around Emily, around us. And now, I wasn't sure of who I was anymore. I guess I also started to question myself. Was I not enough for her? Was I too focused on work? I had always prided myself on being the provider, on making sure she had everything she needed. But had I failed her emotionally? Was I just a paycheck to her? Did she ever truly love me, or was I just a convenience? I couldn't help but replay our last few months together, searching for the moment when everything started falling apart. I never saw the signs, not the way she probably did. I was so focused on my career, on climbing higher, that I missed what really mattered. And now, she was gone. Maybe for good. And it was up to me to figure out how to live with that. The moment I read her words, everything felt like it was spinning again. She had written to explain that she had been thinking about me, about us, and that she regretted how things ended. She didn't want me to think she was trying to get back together, but she said she hoped we could reconnect, even if it was just to talk. My first reaction was disbelief. Why now? Why after everything that had happened? Why after all this time? Part of me wanted to ignore it, To just move on like I had been trying to do for the last few months. But another part of me, one that had been holding on to the hope that she still cared, wanted to respond, wanted to see where this could lead. I wasn't sure what to do. What if it was just another way for her to get closure? What if it was a test to see if I still felt something? As I sat there, staring at the letter, my mind raced. The pain of losing her was still there, raw and unhealed. But at the same time, this letter sparked something in me I hadn't felt in a while. Hope. Maybe there was still a chance for us, or maybe this was the universe giving me a second shot at understanding what went wrong. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just throw it away. I had to know more, and yet I was terrified. Terrified that this letter might just rip open old wounds, that reaching out again would be a mistake. But how could I ignore the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was still something there worth saving? For days, I couldn't stop thinking about that letter. It sat on my desk, a constant reminder of everything I had lost, and everything I might still have a chance to regain. My mind kept cycling through all the possibilities. Could we start over? Was this the second chance I had been waiting for? Or was it just another way to drag myself back into a relationship that had already ended once? I spent sleepless nights tossing and turning, going over every detail of our past. The good times, the bad ones. The way she used to laugh, the way she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world. But then there were the times I had ignored her, the late nights at the office when she was home alone, waiting for me to show up. I had always been so focused on my career, thinking that if I just worked harder, I could provide her with everything she wanted. But I had lost sight of what mattered most, her. I had told myself that I was okay without her, that I could move on, that I was better off being alone. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I wasn't happy. I wasn't whole. And now, Emily was reaching out, offering me something I hadn't expected, an opportunity to heal, to find closure, or maybe to rebuild what we once had. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about that letter. It sat on my desk, a constant reminder of everything I had lost, and everything I might still have a chance to regain. My mind kept cycling through all the possibilities. Could we start over? Was this the second chance I had been waiting for? Or was it just another way to drag myself back into a relationship that had already ended once? I spent sleepless nights tossing and turning, going over every detail of our past. The good times, the bad ones. The way she used to laugh, the way she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world. But then there were the times I had ignored her, the late nights at the office when she was home alone, waiting for me to show up. I had always been so focused on my career, thinking that if I just worked harder, I could provide her with everything she wanted. But I had lost sight of what mattered most, her. I had told myself that I was okay without her, that I could move on, that I was better off being alone. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I wasn't happy. I wasn't whole. And now, Emily was reaching out, offering me something I hadn't expected, an opportunity to heal, to find closure, or maybe to rebuild what we once had. I still didn't know if it was the right choice. What if meeting her again opened up old wounds? What if I found out that she had moved on, that she was happier without me? Could I handle that? Could I deal with seeing her and realizing that everything I had hoped for was just a fantasy? Or maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to prove that I could be the man she needed, that I could learn from my mistakes and be a better partner this time around. I thought about the years we spent together, the dreams we had shared, and the plans we had made. And for the first time since she left, I realized something. I had always loved her. I may have been too focused on my own ambitions to see it before. But now, it was clear. The question wasn't whether I still loved her, it was whether she still loved me. Whether we could get back to what we had, or whether we were both just holding on to something that had already slipped through our fingers. So, I made the decision. I reached out. I agreed to meet her. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to face the truth, whatever it was. And maybe, just maybe, this was the chance I needed to move forward, with her or without her. The day of the meeting finally arrived. I had spent hours picking out what to wear, trying to look casual but put together, like I hadn't been obsessing over this moment for weeks. I was nervous, more nervous than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about seeing Emily again, it was about everything that seeing her would bring back. The memories, the guilt, the unfinished conversations we never got to have. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted her immediately. She hadn't changed much, but there was something different about her, a maturity that I hadn't noticed before. It was in the way she sat, in the way her eyes met mine, steady, calm. I couldn't tell if it was sadness or peace. But it was there, just beneath the surface. My heart skipped a beat. Seeing her, after all this time, felt like being hit by a wave of emotions I didn't know I had left. We sat down, exchanged small pleasantries, but there was an unspoken tension between us. We both knew why we were here. The air between us was heavy with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that still lingered. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a reckoning. We had both made mistakes, and neither of us had the answers, but we needed to talk. She started, almost tentatively, telling me how she had felt during our time apart. The loneliness, the confusion, the way I had been so focused on my work that I couldn't see what she needed. It stung, hearing her admit it so plainly. But I knew she was right. I had always been a workaholic, thinking that providing for her financially would make up for everything I couldn't give her emotionally. And I could see now, in her eyes, how much that had hurt her. Then, she turned the question back to me. "Why didn't you try harder to fix things?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. I paused, trying to find the words. What could I say? How could I explain that I had been afraid? Afraid of losing myself in her. Afraid of failing her, and afraid of losing everything I had worked for. I told her the truth, as best as I could. I had been lost. I had been too busy trying to build a future that I had forgotten to live in the present. I had thought I could make up for it later, that one day, when I had everything, I could be the man she needed. But I realized too late that I had been wrong. I had put everything before her, and I had lost her in the process. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The world outside the cafe felt distant, like it didn't matter anymore. For a moment, it was just the two of us, caught in the past, trying to figure out how we got here. I wasn't sure if this was a moment of closure or a new beginning. But I knew one thing for sure, the truth was out there, between us. And I wasn't sure where we went from here, but I knew I had to be honest with myself, and with her. After the meeting, my mind was a whirlwind. I could still feel the weight of Emily's words pressing down on me. We had talked, and we had been honest with each other, but I was still torn. Could I go back to the way things were? Could we fix what had been broken? I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to piece together the truth, to figure out what I was supposed to do now. Emily had said that she had moved on, that she had healed in her own way. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hope, or maybe it was just wishful thinking on my part. I couldn't tell. But what I did know was that seeing her again had awakened something in me that I thought was long gone, a longing. A desire to fix things, to get back to the life we had once dreamed about together. But then, I remembered why we had split up in the first place. The reasons we had drifted apart. The distance I had put between us, both emotionally and physically. I had been so consumed by my career that I had forgotten to nurture the most important thing in my life, our relationship. I had ignored her needs, and when she needed me most, I wasn't there. I couldn't ignore that truth. Emily was right. It wasn't just about picking up where we left off, it was about being willing to face the reality of what had happened and why we had ended things. And I knew deep down that if I tried to rekindle our relationship without truly changing, without confronting my own flaws, it would only lead to more heartbreak. It wasn't fair to either of us, so I had to make a choice. I had to let go of the idea of what could have been and accept the reality of what was. Letting go didn't mean I didn't love her. It didn't mean I didn't care. But it meant I had to stop living in the past. I had to stop looking for the answers in yesterday, and start looking for them in today. I had to heal. 2. I couldn't keep trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix anymore. Emily deserved to be happy, and I deserved to find my own happiness as well. That meant releasing the guilt, the regrets, and the what-ifs. I wasn't the same person I had been when we were together. I had grown. And I needed to honor that growth by moving forward. If Emily and I were meant to find our way back to each other, it would happen, but it would have to come from a place of mutual growth and understanding. We couldn't go back to the past, but we could build a new future, separately or together. So, I made my decision. I had to move forward. I had to let go of Emily and our past, and trust that the right things would fall into place. Even if it meant walking down a different path than I had originally imagined. It was hard at first, trying to navigate life without Emily in it. For years, I had defined my success by what I had built with her, by the life we were supposed to share. But now, all that had crumbled. I felt like I was starting from scratch, and I wasn't sure where to begin. The first few days after making my decision to move on were the hardest. The silence in my apartment was deafening, and every part of me wanted to call her, to reach out, to somehow find a way back to the comfort of what we had. But every time I picked up my phone, I put it back down. I couldn't go back. I had made a promise to myself that I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I had to change, first for me, then for anyone else who would come into my life after. If I didn't heal, if I didn't take the time to understand myself, I would repeat the same patterns. So I started small. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted away from in the chaos of my career and my relationship. It felt good to laugh again, to share moments with people who remembered the person I used to be, the person I still could be. I also started working on my health, something I had neglected for so long. I joined a gym, something I had told myself I would do someday. And I forced myself to get out of bed early, to sweat, to push myself. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like a battle, but there was something deeply satisfying about taking control of my body again, about feeling strong in ways I hadn't felt in years. It was a symbol of the internal strength I was starting to build, a reminder that I could still take charge of my life, despite everything that had happened, and most importantly, I began to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I started dreaming again. Not just about success or achievements, but about the kind of man I wanted to be. I thought about the future, about what I wanted in my relationships, my career, and my life. I wasn't defined by my past failures anymore. I was starting fresh, building a new vision for who I could be. The process wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. There were days when the pain of the past crept back in, when doubts and fears tried to sabotage the progress I was making. But I learned to acknowledge those feelings without letting them control me. I became more comfortable with the idea that healing wasn't linear. Some days I would feel strong, and other days I would feel weak. And that was okay. What mattered was that I was moving forward, that I was rebuilding myself one step at a time. I had to accept that the version of me who had been with Emily, the version of me who had failed her and myself, wasn't the person I was anymore. And that was okay. I wasn't looking to be perfect. I was looking to be real. I wanted to learn from my mistakes, not repeat them, and to live a life that felt authentic, that felt true to who I had become. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it, and using it as a stepping stone to become the man I wanted to be. I found strength within myself that I didn't even know I had. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. I had learned to take care of myself, to face my fears, and to stop running from the uncomfortable truths of my past. I wasn't whole yet, but I was on my way. And that was enough. It happened when I least expected it. After months of focusing on myself, rebuilding my life, and getting to know who I was again, I felt ready to take on new challenges. But love? That was the furthest thing from my mind. I had spent so much time healing from the past that the idea of a relationship seemed like something distant, almost like a dream. But sometimes, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was a regular Saturday morning, and I decided to visit a new cafe in the city, a place I had heard good things about but never gotten around to trying. I walked in, ordered my coffee, and found a seat near the window, just enjoying the morning. I was lost in my own thoughts when a voice interrupted me. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up and saw a woman standing there, smiling politely. She was striking, short, with dark hair and a warmth in her eyes that immediately made me feel comfortable. Without thinking, I smiled and shook my head, gesturing for her to sit. We exchanged pleasantries, and as the conversation began, I realized how easy it was to talk to her. She was kind, intelligent, and had this quiet confidence that drew me in. I wasn't expecting any of this, but as we spoke, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, a spark. It was a simple conversation about our favorite books, the weather, and what brought us to the cafe, but beneath it all, there was an undeniable chemistry. She wasn't the type of woman I had been with before. She didn't have the same energy as Emily, but there was something refreshing about her, something new, something I wasn't used to. And that made me realize how much I had changed over the past months. I wasn't looking for a woman to replace Emily. I was looking for someone who fit the new me, someone who saw me for who I had become, not who I used to be. We spent the next few hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. By the end of the morning, we had exchanged numbers, and I walked out of the cafe feeling like something had shifted in me. I wasn't ready to jump into another relationship. I knew that. But meeting her, this stranger who had become someone I could easily connect with, reminded me that love could still be a part of my future. And that was a huge step for me. As the days passed, I found myself thinking about her. Her name was Lily, and I couldn't help but smile at the memory of our conversation. I was taking things slow, just like I promised myself I would. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I had learned to be open, to trust again, and to recognize when something felt right. And with Lily, for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was the possibility of something new, something beautiful. This was different from the past. This wasn't about recreating a relationship that had ended. It was about starting something fresh, something rooted in the lessons I had learned. And for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. Hopeful about love, about the future, and about what could come next.